Amazing. All these people are joining. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the second event. And you're all super early, which is amazing. We love early people here. Early people are delightful. One of many delightful things we will hopefully be talking about today. So I am just setting up the Facebook stream and we're just waiting for everybody to arrive. Hello, all the attendees. Hello, people who are joining. Okay, so we should be live on Facebook now too. Amazing. Hello. Mike says, give us a smile, Jack. Coaching us from the wings. I love it. So to people who are joining, welcome. I'm Zarino from Engage Liverpool. The people you can see on your screen are your panelists and hosts that will be coming up. And we'll hopefully be starting in about 5 minutes or so, once people have had a chance to join. In the meantime, if you want to try out some of the features, there's two things to know. Well, three things. One is that nobody can see or hear you. It's not like a regular Zoom call. So there's two things you can do. One is you can raise your hand. So there's a button on your screen to raise your hand. So feel free to raise your hand to say hi to everybody and to let me know you can actually hear me. And there's also a chat panel. So if you want to post any questions or comments, you can press chat and type into the chat box. And it would be good if once we're going, if you've got any questions or anything, try and keep them to the end. Just it makes it easier for us to see all of the questions. Hey, thank you. Hello, Diana. And if you, by the way, if you notice, Mike Chitty and Emma Behrman, who are two of the organisers as well of the event, they're in the chat as well. So they're already chatting to everybody, as you'd expect. But feel free to say hi to them too. They've all decided to stay off camera. I've got no idea why. Hello, hello to all the new people who are joining. Hello, I'm Zarino from Engage Liverpool. Welcome to the delightful city, our second one. This one's about Leeds and Liverpool. And if you missed my intro at the start, we'll be getting going in about 5 minutes. You are welcome to press the raise hand button if you can hear me. Let's try and get a sort of Mexican wave going in the panelists list. There we go, Diana and Katie and Anand and Emma, amazing, and Peter. It's magical. And there's also a chat, so you can press the chat button and feel free to post comments or questions in there to any of the panelists or your other attendees. Nobody can see or hear you though. This isn't like a normal Zoom call. So if you want to ask any questions or comments, in the chat is the place to put them. We're also streaming onto Facebook, and we've got Andrew from Wordscape in Liverpool transferring questions over. So if you want to leave any comments on Facebook, feel free to leave them in the comments on the video, and Andrew will make sure that Ed and Gerry see them. Hello to all the new people. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. I think we'll get cracking in about 3 minutes or so. Give people a good 5 minutes to turn up. I know sometimes if you haven't used Zoom before, it can be it can take you at least 5 minutes to get it installed and set up and stuff. So. Out of interest, the people who are already in the chat, where are you from? Have we got a majority Leeds contingent here, or have we got mostly Liverpool? Nairobi? No way. I think Anand wins the award for furthest away participant in either of our calls. Hello, Lawrence and Christina from Liverpool. Hello. I think maybe there's slightly more Leeds here than Liverpool. That's good to see. It's good to see the Leeds massive coming out to support their own. I think most of the people in Liverpool are probably nursing a hangover after last night and the night before. It's not a competition, you're right, Emma. We're happy to have whoever will come, wherever you're from. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, Shaf. I think we'll give people 1 more minute and then we'll get cracking. So for people who are new and who've only just joined, I'm Zarino Zapier from Engage Liverpool. The lovely people you can see on your screen are your panelists from Leeds and 2 hosts. And we'll be starting very soon. We're also live streaming on Facebook. And if you've got any questions, feel free to press the chat button on your screen. It'll open up the chat panel and you can type questions or comments into there. If you've got any questions though for any of the speakers, try and keep them till near the second half of the event. We'll let you know when that is, just to make it easier for us to see the questions rather than them all disappearing. Amazing. Okay, I'm thinking maybe we should get cracking. Does that sound good to everybody? All right, so I'll hand over to your host for the evening, which is Ed from Leeds. Take it away,
Ed. Great. Right, good evening. My name's Ed. I love Leeds. Please excuse my ridiculous lockdown hair. And I'm your host for tonight. So the plan is, like with any good party, the host just makes everything flow and doesn't get in the way of good conversations. But I'm just going to start off with a brief introduction and then hand over to the panelists and we'll take it from there. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Liverpool for kicking us off in fantastic style with the twin event to this one a week ago. Thank you to all those who've helped get the ball rolling on this little project, namely Emma Behrman, Mike Chitty, all those at Engage Liverpool, Andrew from Wordscape, and anyone else I've forgotten. By way of introduction, in case you weren't with us last week, the past 3 or 4 months have, of course, been an almighty disruption. A word I really like is fissure. You know, what we've seen is a great tear in the fabric of our society, our culture, and that ripping has somewhat, I suppose, revealed the lie of the land, the foundations of our lives. And in the new space that's opened up, new imagination has emerged. Imagination and appetite for not rushing to return to the old normal, but instead to press ahead perhaps into new normals. We will only do so partially because the gravitational pull of the old is strong, like with the Death Star in Star Wars, as somebody said to me this week. But let's reach for generative new normals and let's set our sights high. So for that reason, I really liked the idea, liked the idea of exploring what might delight us in a post-COVID reality. Not what we might tolerate, but what might excite us, inspire us, bring us more alive. The conversation currently revolves around 2 cities. Last week we heard from great folk in Liverpool, and this week it's our turn here in Leeds. I'm sure you'll all agree, ours are 2 great cities. We've had our ups and downs, economically, politically, socially, culturally, and of course with sport. On the subject of which it has of course been a big week for football. Leeds beat Fulham today and are back at the top of the Championship. And I think Liverpool are doing quite well at the moment too. Anyway, I'll be handing over shortly to 3 fantastic local speakers who are each going to share different perspectives on what would delight them in a post-COVID landscape. We're going to time them fairly rigorously within 5 minutes. The plan is that their splurges are just tasty starters ahead of a bigger meal. Because after them, we want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and insights via the chat function here, and we'll weave as many of your contributions in as possible. Just to reiterate what Zarino said, please comment throughout, but share your questions for after the speakers have finished to help us gather those questions. Then I think the idea is that these 2 sessions are a launch pad for a longer inquiry, a weaving together of experiences and stories, not just from our 2 cities, but far further afield, in order to build imagination and momentum towards a different, better way of living together. Very briefly, last week we talked about many good things, and I can't do them all justice in brief, but to give a taste of what we chewed on. There was a great discussion about the established mainstream economy and how it is like the emperor with no clothes, a fragile and insubstantial thing when tested. We discussed scale and the opportunity to shift towards organising ourselves and our economy around the small scale. There was on this energy, particularly around the idea of a 15-minute neighbourhood. We looked at care, at well-being and at neighbourliness, at the way in which more of us have noticed and have been nurtured by nature these last months. We talked about leadership, about listening, collaboration and power, especially in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement. We looked at time and headspace and not wanting to rush, not wanting to lose that as we rush back to the so-called normal, and much more besides. But now, without further ado, our panellists. First up is Anj Handa. Anj is the founder of Inspiring Women Changemakers, a global inclusive movement of people who focus on fairness and safety for women. She leads by example by herself being an immensely inspiring woman. She's a policy influencer, company advisor, speaker, and coach with a passion for the outdoors. She is delighted by hiking, gardening, and wildlife. Anj, over to you.
Evening, everyone. Hope you're having a great Saturday. As Ed said, we've got 5 minutes, and he talked about being nurtured by nature. If we're thinking about what would delight us post-lockdown, nature is something that many people have already said they will be sad to give up. We noticed at the start of lockdown that the sky looked bluer, that the leaves looked greener. And I myself did a rewilding project. I have a bridle way at the back of my garden, which is quite long. I dug it all out. I've replanted with wildflowers. This has been ongoing for 2 years, but I've been really focusing on this over the last few months. And what it's already shown in terms of wildlife diversity has been fabulous. On my feeders, I've got goldfinches, bullfinches, chaffinches, a nuthatch for the first time that I've only ever seen in a nature reserve, and all kinds of other insects and butterflies that I genuinely hadn't even seen last year. So it just shows what is possible within a few weeks and a few months, and what would be possible within a few years. So that leads to my idea about what would delight me about a post-COVID-19 Leeds. Leeds' emblem is the owl, and I have two ideas that I'd like to present to you tonight. The first one is about rewilding. How could we encourage more owls around our city? We have 5 species of owls in Yorkshire. I have one, I think a tawny owl, living directly opposite my house. Keeps me awake some nights, but it's just a fabulous thing for me to be able to hear that sound. In Leeds, in and around the city, we have a fair bit of waste ground. We've got private car parks that are quite tatty around the edges. We've got bits of waste ground in other areas. So here's me with an owl. You can see how delighted I look with that owl. So we have all this spare space, and it doesn't take much to attract wildlife. If we were to only plant some wild grasses and encourage grassland in and around Leeds city centre, we're likely to see the introduction of animals like little owls and others, which in turn has the potential for pest control as well within our city centre. Thanks, Serena, you can get rid of the owl now. My idea really would be, how can we rewild some of those waste grounds in Leeds to make them look prettier, but in turn introduce owls? I live in North Leeds, and just a few miles up the road is Howard Estate, and that's where they did the rewilding project for red kites. I daily have 2 to 3, sometimes 4 red kites flying over my house, pretty low, and we have that potential with owls as well. There are associated problems, and we can cover some of those in the questions, but that's the first thing. Anyone that follows me on social media will know how much I do love nature, but that I'm also passionate about recycling and upcycling. And how would it be if we had giant owl sculptures and even smaller owl sculptures in and around our city? In Toronto, for example, there are life-size moose. So by a public pond, there is a life-size moose in swimming trunks ready to dive in. By shopping malls, they have moose in different outfits. So we could do something like that. Or one of the ideas that we could do is have a giant observatory near Leeds City Station where people can climb up through something made from potentially scrap metal and go and use the telescopes, which are the eyes, to view the city. So you can see I'm hugely passionate about this owl idea, and I think, how can we make it happen? The first one is quick and easy. It's something we could do as a citizen-led project if we had the permission. The second might take a bit more work, but it would tie in beautifully with the Owl Trail idea, which is 25 locations around Leeds listed on a map where you can go and look for exactly. Ansia in the chat saying the Leeds Owl Trail is well established. Indeed it is. So why don't we build on that idea and extend it further with the idea of smaller owl sculptures rather than just the owls that we have already on the Owl Trail list? So that's my idea, short and sweet. I'm happy to discuss these ideas in the question. Claire Devaney has said, I love the idea of rewilding our cities. So pleased that Liverpool City Council's been investing in green walls. I love those green walls too, Claire. We have some on the West Yorkshire Playhouse and other things. However, they do look quite manufactured, and I'd love to see, because I'm a patriotic Leeds girl, I would love to see rambling white roses on some of our city centre facades. So that's my idea in a nutshell. Love to take your questions later on, and have a great evening. Passing you over now back to Ed and then to Liz.
Great, thank you, Anj. Great stuff. Great kick-off there. So moving swiftly on, next up is Liz Wright. Liz is a speaker, writer, disability activist, consultant, who in her spare time happens to be a Paralympic medalist, as you do. Liz is the editor of Conscious Being, an online publication for disabled women by disabled women. Over to you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be involved with this, and it's really made me think about what would absolutely delight me to have in Leeds. As you can tell by the accent, I'm an Aussie, and so I'm not a native to Leeds, but I've lived here for 10 years now, and I'm definitely an adopted Yorkshire lass, and I love this city so much. And one aspect of this city that I absolutely loved since I arrived is the thriving music scene. I'm definitely someone who loves live music. I love attending concerts and festivals and things like that. But in recent years, I've not attended as many concerts or festivals as much as I used to because of anxiety, which is caused essentially by accessibility issues around live music and concerts and festivals and stuff like that. It's not to say that a lot of these places don't have accessibility options for people with disabilities, but they're options that aren't really intuitive in any way, and definitely don't cover kind of every aspect of disability. I can think of one particular example of a time at a festival which did start to cause my anxiety around live music being a safe space and accessible space for disabled people. And this was at Download Festival. So not Leeds Festival, I do want to get to Leeds Festival one day, but this was Download Festival further down south. And I'm sure many of you have seen Bridget Jones's Baby, the movie Bridget Jones's Baby. And in that movie, she goes to a festival at the start, and she happens to lose a shoe in the mud because, as you know, festivals are renowned for being extremely muddy and very wet and rainy and all that awful stuff. And she lost a shoe and ended up falling basically flat in the mud on her face. Basically, at Download Festival, I didn't nearly lose a shoe, I nearly lost my prosthetic leg in the mud. Basically, I was walking between two of the accessible disability platforms at the festival, and it was really muddy, and basically the suction from the mud nearly suctioned off my prosthetic leg. And I ended up stuck there for a while. I had to get help from some of the lads that were around me. They had to kind of help me pull my leg out of the mud. And it was from that point that I started to doubt my ability to actually get to festivals. And I really want to go to Leeds Festival, but I don't want a repeat of the mud incident at Download. So I kind of thought about, for me, in terms of what would delight me in Leeds, in a kind of post-COVID environment, is how we can actually make our music festivals and concerts and live music much more accessible for disabled people. Understanding that wider scope of what disability actually is and what accessibility should be made available. And I think one of the biggest things that COVID and this pandemic has taught us is that technology can do amazing things. I mean, right now we're having a discussion about two cities, Liverpool and Leeds, and talking about what delights us and what excites us and what we hope for afterwards. And it's this use of technology that's enabling us to do this. And one of my fellow disability activists on Twitter actually tweeted the other day that her dream would be that festivals, music festivals, could actually kind of beam into other spaces so that she could attend festivals, because a bit like me, she has anxiety and mental health issues that prevent her from actually attending these festivals. But you still want to be there with the atmosphere and that feeling of excitement of seeing the live music. So my idea is looking at spaces within Leeds, perhaps when Leeds Festival is on, in that we can almost spread or have the festival reach out into the city and actually create really safe spaces for people who maybe have accessibility issues, whether it's physical disability or mental health issues, that they can still enjoy that atmosphere but feel safe within that space to actually watch the live music on a big screen or something like that. An example I can think of what's happening kind of around us at the moment, which is a little bit of insight from a friend of mine, is there's something called Live Nation, which is going to start happening soon. And this is actually to support the music industry, but it shows the flexibility of what you can use within the music industry. And this is basically a live music drive-in. So what they're doing is they're setting up squares where you can drive in, a bit like drive-in movie, drive in, park in your square, and you can get out of your car and sit in your square and watch live music. So we're keeping that social distance space happening. So that kind of is just a really good example of how we could maybe start looking at making live music more accessible, and especially in light of COVID-19, perhaps maintaining that social distance as well. So I'll stop talking now and I'll pass it back over to Ed. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Liz, very much. That's fantastic. Keep your comments coming on the chat. That's great. But perhaps keep your questions for after Jack has finished, just to make sure we don't lose anything. Finally, for our lead speakers this week, we have Jack Simpson. Jack, I would call a shape-shifting serial social innovator. Originally from Leeds, he left but happily came back like some kind of prodigal son. He has co-founded culture site The State of the Arts, Eiger Studios, a Hyde Park book club arts venue, the Digital Access West Yorkshire, and more. And with all the spare time he has on his hands, he's doing a politics PhD at the University of Leeds. He's a busy boy. So over to you, Jack. What would delight you?
Hey, Ed, yeah, thanks a lot for that. And great to hear you, Liz and Anj, and thanks for inviting me, everybody, in such a great project. And yeah, I guess I'd like to begin by just saying that I found life quite delightful recently, really. And I think part of that is that I've just had much less kind of emails and admin to do. And part of that gives me a kind of hope about what the future could look like, I guess. I'm going to split the discussion a little bit between some structural suggestions for Leeds or thoughts and some things about aesthetic pleasures I'd like. I know in our discussion after hearing the Liverpool people, there seemed like a discussion about some of the things about the economy and the structure, and also things that are more kind of on the ground kind of aesthetic pleasures. And I guess I want to say partly as well that the two are obviously linked. So kind of John Maynard Keynes said something along the lines of that there are more interesting things in life than economics and politics, but that these things are the things that allow the kind of nice things to happen. So I guess for me, working in culture, I feel there's that strong link really between the kind of economic foundations of the city and what the city stands for, and the culture that we're allowed to kind of make here. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the stuff I think about kind of moving beyond GDP and wealth creation as vital for the city. A bit about how northern life is often presented as struggle, and then a few things about kind of my day. So I'd also begin by saying lots of my favourite days, and I'm not just saying this because we're talking with people from Liverpool, but I've ended with listening to You'll Never Walk Alone, sometimes at 4 or 5 a.m, quite smashed, I'll be honest. Listen to You'll Never Walk Alone, and I think it's an amazing song, and obviously congratulations to Liverpool fans. And I think in You'll Never Walk Alone, alongside Marching On Together, the Leeds song, and the Leeds phrase, side before self, is this idea really that individuals flourish when communities flourish. And I think part of what I think is going on at the moment, or we have the potential really, is towards this moment of kind of solidarity and seeing cities and economies as necessarily needing each other. So the two things structurally I'd say is, one, I think Leeds would be great if we moved beyond the idea that GDP was something that people should aim for in the city. I use something called the capability approach, but people might think of it as flourishing or the well-being of citizens. So I think if we overtly said as a city, look, that's what we're aiming for really. So when people move to the city, big business, or people want to build more flats or whatever, we kind of say, well, look, like there are already people here. Is this going to make people's lives better? I also think in light of both COVID and what's gone on, well, it began in the US, but has spread around the world, we're all kind of facing these questions where we're reevaluating how we've got a shared reliance on care systems, I guess. So whether that's the NHS, or whether that's supermarket workers, or whether it's the role of the police in the US. But yeah, I think that's a bit of a moment. And I think if people, whether they consider themselves on the left or progressive, were to miss that, that'd be bad. So for me, for Leeds to look at that would be good. And I think Erica said something last week really about Liverpool doing a similar thing. And I think it's such an important thing to say that there are more important things than wealth creation. I'm often at meetings with the council here in Leeds, and they're great people. But often we all feel, I think, the need to say, and it will bring this much kind of material growth. Whereas really, you know, lots of the people, you know, that where I grew up in East Leeds and lots of the areas in Leeds, it's hard to see that the material growth of the last few years have really made things much better. So that's one thing. I'd really like Leeds to kind of overtly say there is something that we're aiming for beyond that. In terms of what that might look like, I think having more businesses that are owned that are clearly in the interest of Leeds. So when you look often at whether it's the arena or lots of the banking system in Leeds, the money that's going through there is kind of leaving the city, really. I think the city could have better communication. So I think it could be more easy for citizens of the city to communicate their preferences. Often when the whole of the urban landscape within the city centre gets reshaped, citizens of Leeds have not really had much of a say in that. And I think basically we really just need to kind of like reframe what cities are for, and especially what Leeds is for. And then I can see time is already run out. 5 minutes is not very long, is it? So I think the other thing that I would probably reframe a little bit, but this is probably a northern thing more than Leeds, is this idea really that you know, life is aimed around so much for kind of struggle, and I think just trying to aim some of the city around making things as beautiful as possible. When I've talked to friends who've been involved in lots of projects to try and make Leeds prettier, often the sense is that we think spending money on these things is kind of, it's a bit of a Yorkshire thing, I think, that people are a bit like, why are we spending money on that? So there's a light installation or big events in the city. So I think some of it would be reframing things like that. But I think you could capture everything I'm saying really in Leeds just having more of a discussion really about what the point of the city is and who the city is for. So yeah, that'd be my main thing, a reframing of what the city is for. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Great stuff. Really, yeah, it's great to see the themes emerging. I'm now just going to hand over to Gerry. Gerry is from Engage Liverpool, who hosted last week's event. And I suppose, yeah, Gerry is an outsider for Leeds, so it'd just be interesting to hear some thoughts and reflections from you, Gerry, as to what you're hearing and what you're seeing.
Thanks very much, Ed, and thanks to all the Leeds panellists. I don't feel completely an outsider. My family moved to Leeds. We lived in North Leeds, just off Headingley, a little place called Wheatwood. And so I know how beautiful the place is. And certainly Anj's whole concept around rewilding. I've never lived in a place before that was so near to so much magnificent countryside. It was really, really spectacular. So really great stuff to hear that, and thank you to everybody. Yeah, I'd really enjoy listening to Anj's stuff around the birds and rewilding. That's certainly something which resonates very much. I'm glad for the idea of birds. That's something I've not heard a lot about that in Liverpool, but I am aware that we've been part of a Northern Flower House concept, kind of working around the Northern Powerhouse idea. Looking at using wildflowers in the city centre and across the suburbs. So that's something that I really like. It resonates very much. Very, very keen to see that happening. And I love the fact you've got the Leeds Owl Trail well established. It's brilliant. And Liz, gosh, you need to come to Liverpool, girl, and live in Liverpool. There's so much live music, so much music festivals. And you've made me think, how accessible are they? We have a number of people on our city council who are themselves disabled and very keen to make sure that everything that happens is accessible to lots of different types of disability. So I'm hoping that we're doing our best, but you'd be great to come over and have a look at some of the stuff. So consider yourself invited to a Liverpool event, and we'll see how we're matching up. But that was a great contribution, Liz, so thank you for that. And Jack just blew me away with all kinds of individuals flourish when communities flourish. That's probably going to be my quote for the night. You'll never walk alone, and marching together. Yeah, brilliant. something we believe very much in Liverpool, a great community spirit. Leeds, again, Yorkshire people are fantastic for that, a sense of ownership of who we are, sense of belonging, sense of identity, and life beyond GDP. We're just banging the drum with you there. Definitely, it's all about aiming higher, aiming for more, the kind of well-being. I love your stuff about keeping money in the city. We've got to be more focused on making sure we buy local, source local, grow local, and support local people. Engage has had a project where we've been, during the lockdown, we started supporting local restaurants who did, independent restaurants who did takeaway meals. So we encouraged one night a week, all people we knew, to buy a meal, have a Zoom chat together, and that was really, really good. It's been great. So trying to develop that sense, we're with you all the way on that. And reframing Leeds, let's bring it on. And can you make sure you give us some ideas to reframe Liverpool as well? So thanks very much. Over to you, Ed, for the discussion.
Great. So yeah, so thanks again to our panelists. Thank you, Gerry. Thank you to all of you contributing on the chat. There's some really good stuff coming out there as well. I think just because I think this is something that we could weave into all the contributions we've had so far, and then we'll perhaps come on to some of the more specific stuff afterwards. Something we started to touch on last week, but we didn't really have time to do it justice, and we probably don't have time to do it justice now, is I suppose I'm interested in leadership and the role of leadership. Somebody was asking on the chat about permission. Why ask permission? Just crack on with guerrilla rewilding. And there's a quote, I don't know if he regrets it or not, but and I think it's true. So Tom Reardon, who's the Chief Executive of Leeds City Council, hello if you're there, Tom. Somehow I suspect you're not, but he said that he wants Leeds to be a city which asks, where people ask permission, ask forgiveness, not permission, and which I like and regularly quote. So I suppose my question is, with regards to everything we've talked about, whether it's guerrilla rewilding or kind of stuff around accessibility, or just kind of all the reframing the culture and the economy. I suppose a question for all the panelists, or indeed everyone, is what's the role of leadership, and the role of just being a bit anarchist and just taking matters into your own hands. It's not to say you don't pay attention to other stuff, but what can we do about leadership? Do we just need to be more bold? Anyone?
Okay, I can join in. I suppose with mine, it to some extent, I feel in Leeds there have been pockets of people taking their own initiative. So an example around Leeds are the little book libraries that are popping up all over the place. That's been lovely. And they have also been in North Leeds. So I live in Moortown in North Leeds, but in Chapel Allerton, which is just a few minutes down the road, we've currently got various artists painting or doing street art on quite ugly electricity boxes and things. So these things are making the city look quite attractive. You know, they're vibrant, they showcase the city in different ways. So there are signs like A up in Upper Headingley, things like that, that really connect back to Yorkshire. So, you know, it's about finding that balance. We obviously have planning regulations and other things, but I'm sure there are many things that we haven't done because we think we're not allowed to do.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Having grown up in Leeds and now, having spoken to a lot of people at the council and people in culture, I think both sides of the fence have this idea that people are waiting for permission, but there isn't really anybody necessarily that could give you the permission. And after 10 years of austerity and whatever's coming next, I really think one of the kind of nice things, like when we started the digital access project, was this sense that we are citizens in the city, we can see a problem that we can solve. Let's just crack on and do it, really. And I think there's probably something, it's probably something in a deep-seated kind of esteem of Leeds and Leeds people, and maybe it's a wider Yorkshire thing. But I think it's this sense that you're kind of waiting for somebody, maybe a better, to get on and tell you that you can do it. And you know, I think especially in these times when local councils are going to be cash strapped, I think it is a time for that. And it's probably also a time for, you know, maybe the left to not be so skeptical about individuals or small businesses getting cracking on and doing things, and not thinking that everything that's good must come from the state.
I'd like to jump in there if that's possible. Support Jack very much. I think one of the big things is looking at the quality of leadership, which Ed's kind of thrown as a challenge. And I think we're going to struggle for a long time when leadership in our political system is seen as power. And you have to, I think what enables a councillor to get to the top of the party, a lot of nasty stuff and difficult stuff usually, are not the skill set required to lead a city. I think facilitation is a model that we need to have for our cities. And until we get more people willing to facilitate what local ordinary people can do, not getting in the way, not making the decisions, but enabling local communities to have power over their budgets. I used to live in South America, and we're very much involved in, particularly in starting in Argentina, in the concept of, and in Brazil, the participatory budgeting, where people were given sums of money for their communities and they made the decisions. That was a power structure that understood the role of facilitation, and I think we're a long way from that, sadly, yet.
And can I just leap in as well? I think as well, I have to address the diversity of leadership. I think it has to be reflective of the communities that they're kind of representing. And I know, you know, from my perspective, in terms of disability, I don't think there's enough understanding of disability in leadership of cities in terms of how that then impacts disabled communities. And I know that probably ripples out to other minority groups and people with protected characteristics as well. So I think diversity is really important.
I think you're absolutely right. I'd also add to that quite often I'm at discussions. I was at a discussion early on in the Leeds 2023 process where we had 7 provocations and everybody got up and said, you know, quite rightly, this shouldn't be about kind of white men. This shouldn't be all these kind of things. But none of them had Leeds accents, right? So none of the people there, everybody recognised that this shouldn't be about this and it shouldn't be about that. But I am so rarely at a meeting at a kind of high level of culture in Leeds where anybody else at that meeting is from Leeds, which is a kind of crazy thing, right? It's which I think is often kind of misunderstood. So yeah, I'd totally back what you're saying there.
I agree with that. I'm an arts charity chair, not in Leeds, but in Bradford, because I felt I needed to share the Yorkshire love. And it's so true. I think within those structures, there isn't that much representation, and particularly within different sectors as well. And one of the points we've had from Shaf here is the problem that councillors see community activists as a threat to their power. I know I've seen that. So what would it take? You know, how can we break down some of that competition or that power struggle, if you like, where we've seen communities do really great and positive stuff for the city when they have just done things for themselves?
Do you think also we could just be more secure as a city? Because I feel like quite often when we have big issues, or even when, you know, the stuff that's happened recently, whether it's COVID or the Black Lives Matter stuff, we're kind of reluctant to come together as a city, and even if we all disagree, to publicly just disagree. So I wonder whether some of it is that, whether it's councillors that are insecure and need to keep a gatekeeper position, or people who work in culture that need to keep that. Whereas I guess, you know, one of the things that I love from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I'm sure lots of people have read that, is this idea of win-win, of moving to a place where we'll all do better if we all do better. And that's the sense that I sometimes get is going on in the city, is that people don't think that I will do better if you do better.
Yeah, definitely. Just to bring in some of the stuff on the chat. So yeah, so I think there's so hi Shaf, provocation from Shaffer out suggesting that Leeds can't change unless the leadership changes, by which presumably you're talking about the council leadership. And I suppose I think there's got to be a challenge to all of us to I suppose to appreciate actually, and this isn't to do down those who are in the political leadership of the city, but actually, you know, they are not the only leaders in the city, and we all have this opportunity to be leaders and to demonstrate leadership. A comment from Jed, which was something basically to be a true leader, you make yourself disappear. It's empowerment work. I heard a really good quote from a senior police officer many years ago where he was saying, a good leader creates not followers, but more leaders. So I guess there's something about, yeah, and I think, but then that then in turn relates to your thing about confidence, Jack. I think there's obviously psychology is underpinning to that, and if we can all help one another just be a bit more secure, that would be a good thing. And then finally, just bring in the scope of, so bring in something else that somebody else said. I'm afraid I missed your name because I'm not very good at multitasking. But somebody was saying, what scope is there for declaring our own economic model? I think it was around kindness, kinder place indicators. And so there's something about just taking a lead and making things happen. I also think there's an interesting role around just declaring stuff, and you don't need to be. And I think leadership is partly an imaginative pursuit. We can all be leaders if we want to be. So I think there's something around, yeah, I suppose, what are we all waiting for? So perhaps a question for all the different panelists. So what either are you waiting for, or what do people what are they waiting for with regards to pushing forward the rewilding, the accessibility stuff, economic stuff? What is there anything you're waiting for? Or is anything, yeah, what are people waiting for?
Can I just say, I think, especially in light of what's happened with the pandemic and COVID-19, I think for disabled people in general, it's almost become, it's not so much that we're waiting for this anymore, but it's almost like with the way that we've had work from home, flexible working, all that, like proven now that it actually works, because we're in a position where non-disabled people were suddenly having to work from home. And so suddenly businesses were able to make their business work from the space of people not being in the office or anything like that. And so it's kind of become this thing, like for a lot of disabled people, it's like, well, okay, there's no excuses anymore for these changes to happen. It's been proven that it's absolutely possible. And if this on such a big scale is possible, I think it's not so much what we're waiting for, but it's like, or not asking us what are we waiting for, but literally just asking that question, like, well, what are we waiting for? Let's just go ahead and do this. It's possible now. And obviously I'm coming from the perspective of disability and accessibility. And as far as I'm concerned now, there is no excuse anymore. There's no point waiting anymore. It can change.
I completely agree with that.
Provocation from Anzia, just on that point. So Anzia says, when disabled people asked for these things, they were rejected. When non-disabled people asked for them, they happened.
Exactly, and that was my point.
Yeah.
And now it's like, essentially after, decades and decades of being discriminated against in the workplace, it's like now we can go into workplaces and say, well, you can't deny us a job because we're asking for reasonable adjustment to work from home. But I think that can be reflected out into or rippled out into all sectors of society, including the cultural sector, in that accessibility is possible. We know it is if people are just willing to actually put in the effort and be creative and make it happen.
Anne, sorry, I cut into you a minute ago. But thank you.
That's fine. I was just agreeing with Liz. I think from a rewilding point of view, many people have picked up gardening even in their own spaces, even if it's small, even if it's a balcony or window box. So people being at home has forced them to do something and create and nurture something. And I've seen quite a visible upsurge of interest in these kind of things. But similar to the point that Liz made, it's possible, people are doing it, and you can have that ripple effect. And if you make one area more wild or more natural, it in turn has a knock-on effect on the others. In part, nature does that job for us through pollinators, through birds taking seeds. The more we encourage, the more that comes anyway. So it's not necessarily a point of waiting, but it's, please, let's not drop this passion that some of us have gained, or the movements that are going on, because it's actually quite easy to do it. You only need to make a few small changes in your own life to see a massive change in terms of the nature around you. Yeah, if you build it, they will come. One plant sustains wildlife in some way. Too true.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there with that, Anj. That was lovely. I live in the largest apartment complex in Liverpool, just off the waterfront, and we have 420 apartments here. And I was chair of the management committee for a period of time, and we had a wildlife area. We had a kind of a public space. We had some wildlife plants there, and then I resigned, and other people came and took in, who immediately got rid of it. This wasn't the council, it wasn't leadership, it was ordinary people who never saw the value of the wildflower, the ecology, the environment, and the insects. It was an amazing 2 or 3 years, and they just wanted lawns. Horrible. And I don't know what we do.
Well, Emma's made a point here, which is the access to nature has to be in the harder inner cities. Tree and planting movements need to start here first. That was the point I said right at the start, which was in and around the Leeds centre area, which is that, you know, the rim as she's described it. That's where there is a lot of land, and it's quite easy to, you know, make grassland there or plant trees. You know, we've got small woods around me. The squirrels have left acorns. I've gone and planted some trees there myself. You know, obviously they haven't had disease, and you've got to be careful about all of that as well. So, you know, we can do these things, and we can do some of it without that coordinated thing. We can do it for ourselves.
And that that neatly brings in a question, if I can scroll back, from Anzir, which was, how can we create an environment where we inspire community action that can multiply and accelerate what the public authorities are able to do? So I guess there's something here about, again, it does relate, I think, to leadership. I think leadership sometimes is an unhelpful word, but how can we just generally hold a core where the community is flourishing, and that enables individuals to flourish?
Yeah,
So I'm sure there's more we can do. What can we do?
I think in some circumstances, for me, we need to see expanded freedom and more participation as a kind of end game. Whereas I think what probably happened, or the sense that I get from other people slightly older, is what happened in kind of new Labour years, that the left became a slightly more kind of often a middle class movement that saw working class people as to be managed and to be kind of looked after, but not really to exact kind of like their preferences. And I think about a project in Leeds that's great, and a friend of mine is one of the key people on it, but it's about reshaping the city centre. And in an age of kind of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these things, we just haven't asked the citizens of Leeds what they think about reshaping their city centre. So I think for me, a lot of it does come down to kind of really that people know what they want and people have preferences. That's just, you know, humans have preferences. But really, they live in a kind of system, and a system which is perpetuated by other humans that really just doesn't listen, and it, in fact, willfully ignores their preferences.
Just a quick one, if I can again, I apologise for jumping in here. One of the advantages of what we're doing tonight is we're beginning to build a kind of alliance between grassroots people in Liverpool, grassroots people in Leeds, and I hope this will spread. But we've also been over the years as Engage involved with some other international places. And Valerie, who's come up in our chat group, talked about she's begun to appreciate during lockdown the green spaces that we already have. And that's absolutely true. We've had exactly the same experience in Liverpool. But the city of Nantes in France is well worth looking at. And we've done some links with Nantes, because they decided a couple of years ago to map all their little green spaces and connect them all together. So they actually have connected every green space across their river, leading right into the heart of the city centre, so that you can now walk along flower streets, lots of tree planting, from green space to green space in this amazing urban park. So we can learn from other places, and there's some great things happening out there.
Very good. I want to just flag some things up that just before they got forgotten. They kind of weaved into things that already happened. So yeah, we've had a reference there to Nantes. There were references before to the Preston model and Claes, if people want to know more about building strong local economies. Somebody else earlier referenced the Robin Hood tax, which is an international movement, but the idea of making it local, again, find out more if you don't already know about it. Somebody else mentioned Thoreau, the writer, Walden, apparently a great book, which I have to say I've never read. So there's kind of lots of stuff that people are throwing in, which is really, really great. I think I'm right saying that we're going to be downloading the thread to this afterwards, and I think uploading it. So if you're really keen, then you'll be able to have a look at all that stuff later. I think, oh yeah, and so one other thing, there was somebody, again, forgive me, I missed the name, so there's lots of comments coming in, and that was suggesting that some days could be become, I suppose, a Sabbath, a rest day again. And I think I'd be interested in coming back to that now. We've got 10 minutes still to go. And I think I'd be interested in the fact that we've all had more time, we've all had more space in the last few months. And I think it's made us perhaps appreciate green space and appreciate, Emma talks about appreciating birdsong. And I think that those aesthetic experiences are so key because they reshape us. But I guess the danger is that we return to the old normal and become busy and frenetic again. And these good things are lost and our imagination becomes clouded again. So I suppose, is there a challenge for all of us to try to almost carve out time and space and not become too busy, but maybe we all commit to doing that all the time. Yeah.
Can I jump in, Ed? I personally, my daily lifestyle hasn't changed that much since lockdown. And it was because of a big life change about 3 years ago. And if we think about this as a massive life change with aspects that we didn't like, but some that we really did like, how can we modify our lives to change it? So mine came about because I broke my ankle a few years ago, but it led to, I was put on a blood thinner, it led to internal bleeding, and then some other complicated things. So my energy levels were really low. But as a consultant, I know that I'm in a lucky place that I can do a lot of work from here, from this space that I'm talking to you all now. So I haven't felt a lot of the impact. You know, obviously I have business-wise, I'm freelance, I'm self-employed, but I didn't want to change things back. Not that they were that frenetic anyway, but we can make these personal commitments to ourselves. And I think this, talking about Sabbath being a rest day, that's our choice, isn't it? We can all do that. I love living in Moortown and seeing my Jewish neighbours walk to the synagogue on a Saturday. You know, small things like that, that's personal choice, and that's all in our power.
I think as well, John has just written in the chat about, like he's written a few things, but the thing I picked up on was actually talking to neighbours and passers-by. And I think, you know, I think since lockdown, I've gotten to know a few of the neighbours so much better, and I now consider them friends, and I hardly ever spoke to them before lockdown. And, you know, I'd been doing a lot of baking since lockdown started, but sharing a lot of that, you know, I made scones the other day, had jam and cream on scones the other day with the neighbour. And it's kind of all these really nice things, which I know for me intentionally, I'm not going to let that go, because it is lovely. It's nice on a broader scale, on a broader life scale. I feel safer living in my neighborhood. I feel more welcome because I've got people now who I'm like, I know them by first name. I know them. I know their interests. I can have a discussion with them. I can reach out to them if I need help or support in any way. So I kind of see that, and what I hope that happens with other people is that they see these positive effects that have happened because of, quite frankly, what is a tragic situation that we're all in, but they recognize that it's these positive things we have to keep and hang on to and cultivate and continue to practice.
Just another thing I want to bring in as well, like I appreciate, of course, time is ticking, but there was another comment much earlier about competition between cities. I'm interested in perhaps, and it relates to this idea of I suppose, confidence and lack of, yeah, kind of wanting to rebuild confidence. I suppose there's a question here. In Leeds, do you think we collaborate well? And across perhaps different cities, do you think we collaborate well? Or how could we do better?
Can I just say a quick word on that one? I don't want to jump into the Yorkshire debate too much, but one of the things I learned from Edinburgh was they have formed a kind of a citizen network, an alliance of parties to fight the over-festivalisation and the expulsion of local people from the whole city structure. I think we need to do the same in Leeds. We need to do the same. We don't work together. We're doing our own little things. So I think citizen groups, community action groups need to start coming together and trying the hard task of forming some kind of manifesto for the city. Otherwise, we're just going to get the power structures building back what we had before. And I think we've got to be about creating a new future that we would be delighted to see, but we're going to have to work at it.
So, but I'm going to take the conversation in a new angle now. There's so many loose ends here. So Marvina on Facebook. Hi, Marvina. Marvina is fantastic. So, except for a fleeting reference earlier, we've not talked about Black Lives Matters. And I suppose perhaps a question for all of us, but I'll start with you, the panelists, would be, I suppose, what are you seeing? What are you learning, particularly from? And I suppose what is presumably, what is provoking you, hopefully in a good way, about
I think it ties into the broader theme that we've been thinking about doing things for ourselves. And Black Voices Matter and Black Lives Matter, both organised, really effective, socially distant, peaceful protests in the city that we didn't necessarily see in other cities. So I think for me, that takeaway that was citizen organised, and police were there, others were there, but we didn't have any level of trouble that some of the cities saw. And I personally felt very proud as a Leeds citizen that our city responded in that way, and that it continues to respond in that way. Personally, I would like to see the momentum continue. It's not a cute slogan or something that will go away. I heard the mother of two murdered women down south give a talk today. It's on my personal Facebook if anyone wants to have a look at that. She was a former archdeacon, and what she said was, I want this to create, Black Lives Matter, to create positive action in the same way that Me Too and other movements did, to create lasting change, which essentially are about system and policy change. And we haven't seen that yet. So that would be my personal comment on Black Lives Matter.
For me, I think it comes back to what I was talking about earlier about diversity in leadership. And I think it's looking at readdressing the in all sectors who is in leadership and how we actually have processes in place to start to change that, and includes that we are hearing Black voices, brown voices, disabled voices, LGBTQ voices, that we're all being heard and we're all being listened to and we're all being believed and considered in terms of how the city is developing in all sectors.
Yeah, Marvina, I think you're totally right. And hey, I did mention it and have more, but realised how short 5 minutes was and cut about 2/3 of mine. But I think there's a huge job in the city to do. I mean, I grew up, when I go stay at my dad's in Chapeltown, and my sister's kids are to a great guy who's from Chapeltown, and he would regularly say to me that he'd feel comfortable being at a restaurant in the city centre because he feels the city centre is essentially a place for white people. And I think, to draw on Ed's previous question about, I think, how are we kind of connecting? I think that we avoid uncomfortable and awkward conversations. It's one thing I'd like us just to be better at, having these conversations where we can we can do these kind of things as a city and know that people will at times disagree, or people will have different life experiences. And I think that's what's kind of let us down at times on all kinds of issues, and definitely on issues of race in the city. And I think we, generally need to be much better. I mean, what I've seen personally from the music scene is a lot of people, really saying, look, how can we help, and trying to be sensitive to that, and white people who work in the city in music, recognizing that more needs to be done, but also knowing that it's a sensitive thing on how they lead about that, not wanting to look like they're doing some kind of savior thing. So yeah, I think you're right. Like, we need to talk more of that, and there's a lot more to be done.
Ed, can I jump in really quickly?
Yeah. Go for it.
So I think it's not even a whiteness thing. I think I don't want, as a British Indian woman from Leeds, I feel a responsibility too, because the issues that I have as a British Indian woman are not the same as my Black British counterparts, male or female. And so we all have this responsibility to look at Black Lives Matter. It's not, to me, it's not a division. It's not it's not black, it's not whiteness. This is a real social issue that needs to be tackled. And Liz talked about it earlier without naming it, but being better allies. And to be a better ally, it's a daily, consistent practice of having uncomfortable conversations. So, Emma's touched on that as well. And I think getting better at having those spaces and that trust to do it. How do we foster that level of trust and open communication? We've done it, Liz and I have done it at a real micro level on race and disability and the intersection of those. But it's because we, love and trust each other. How do we spread that wider? That's a big question. I don't expect anyone to be able to answer it.
I think, thank you, Anj. I think I'm just going to invite, I appreciate it's 2 minutes past 8. We started at 5 past. I'm going to finish at 5 past. I suppose I'd invite each of the panelists, and Anj, you might feel you've already done this, but if you haven't, that's fine. Each of the panelists and Gerry to just perhaps say one thing that you're taking away from today, maybe kind of, I don't know if revelation's too big a word, but if you feel like you've learned or seen something new, now's your moment to each throw something in. And then we are going to wrap up and go back to us after the evenings. So take it away.
Okay, really briefly then, there's so much to reflect on and process from today and from a lot of other conversations in the last month or so. But there is something about inclusion and how as a city we do that better. And that's not just in terms of colour, but in terms of everyone, all under equality law, all protected characteristics. How do we create those spaces and those places for conversations and avoid my personal bugbear, which is hard to reach? People aren't hard to reach. People just haven't made the effort to reach them. That's it.
For me, I think similar to Anj, it's about I think what I've got out of this is the whole inclusion thing, but hearing voices and understanding that we're all as separate communities, we all have to come together and actually work together to make this city more inclusive in every aspect, so that we are feeling more welcome, we are feeling more delight. So I want to bring back, back to that word of delight, of Leeds being a delightful city to be in, to be participating in, to being a community member of. And I think it all comes back to that, having these discussions, getting to know each other beyond the kind of stereotypes and exclusions that we normally face. So.
Yeah, it's been so good hearing everybody, and thanks for inviting us on the questions that have come from elsewhere. Yeah, I feel again like this is a real kind of potential moment for solidarity amongst lots of people who've got differing kind of claims to, like that the word you two have used, the inclusion. And I think part of it is just, it's just this thing of, why are different groups kind of marginalized? And I think often in a city like Leeds, it's they wouldn't be marginalised if there was money to be made, right? Like part of the reason that we've taken such big steps because of COVID is because of the economy that needed protecting for people that, you know, this wasn't to protect the economy for poor people. So I think, you know, one positive I definitely feel from that is that we all have similar fights, and the fights are for, you know, all individuals to have a kind of good opportunity for a good life, really. So yeah, it's really nice hearing everybody's thoughts, and yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. Yeah, I think from me, I'm delighted that this has happened. Sorry that we're not more diverse as a group. Maybe that's how we've originated to some extent in Liverpool as well as in Leeds. But for me, I've never heard Yorkshire voices. I've never heard people who care passionately about their city. And I just think we've started a conversation which is delightful in itself. It needs to expand, it needs to grow. We need to follow this up, and we need to make sure that this conversation empowers all of us listening and taking part in it. And this was an attempt to break a stalemate with the coronavirus and the isolation and separation. And I think it's happened. I'm just pleased it happened. I'd like it to go further, but don't know what will happen next. But let's hear and listen to what you think should happen next. But yeah, talking, we've started what I hope is a relationship, and I hope that will continue. So thank you to Leeds. I'm deeply impressed by Leeds, and it's not a bad thing to be critical about your own city. It doesn't mean it's not a lovely place. It means it can be better. And until we can critique our own cities comfortably, even when others are listening, because maybe about a third of the audience tonight has been from Liverpool listening into this, and even wider afield. And we'll all take something positive away from it. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, so yeah, many thanks to all of you. Many thanks to all of you who have joined and participated. There's a whole load of content, a whole load of questions that we haven't been able to follow up on. And as somebody said, yeah, an hour is just far too short. I suppose my takeaway thing, and it very much echoes what others have already said, is so yeah, I love Leeds, and I spend a lot of time talking Leeds up. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of recognise who we are, and I do think Leeds, the culture of Leeds, in many ways, it's quite a play it safe place and not wanting to rock the boat. And I actually think that it's a personal passion of mine, the idea of really going out of the way of embracing awkward conversations. So today's been, you know, it's been lovely, but and in many ways it's been quite cozy in some respects. And I just think, you know, if through spheres like this and conversations like this, we can really go out of our way to embrace awkward conversations and delight in those awkward conversations and move beyond the fear of, I suppose, yeah, move beyond fear to love, to pick up on one comment there. And so I think, I mean, I think it's fair to say it's unclear where this process is going, but I get the impression, I take no credit for getting this delightful city thing going. I think the aspiration is that it should be a launch pad. So we've had two really good but short conversations. We've had a wide range of people contributing. I'm sure, yeah, I hope we can all stay in contact with one another and build it, not just in Leeds and Liverpool, but build it perhaps across the north, across the world. Yeah, so perhaps talk to Engage Liverpool. If you're in Leeds, talk to Engage Liverpool. I think they are a good place for the buck to stop with for now. And we'd love to keep talking, we'd love to keep being awkward together, and we'd love to keep building delightful cities together. So, thank you very much, and good night. Have a great weekend.